Thanks for joining for the final chapter in this series. Today in this video, we'll be talking about governance, risk and compliance team. This team plays a critical role in organizations' information security program, and they manage and mitigate potential risk, ensure that the organization is compliant to its own standard as well as the standards that are set up by regulatory and legal requirements, as well as it establish governance structure to ensure that decision making is done through a rightful process for all information security risk that or any major changes in the company that can impact the business. Okay, so the main job of the GRC team is to create policies, procedures, guidelines, and monitoring monitoring the organization, managing risk, and overseeing the compliance state of the company. So too many things. Let's dive into this more. First, before I dive into functionality, usually like the GRC team is divided into three functional subdivisions, you can say. The security governance is responsible on creating security policies and procedures, responsibilities, and communication plan. They are usually owned by the company itself, although they might have some sort of consultation role where a third party will come and guide you on how to create a process like that. Then there'll be a risk management team who identify, assess, and manage potential risk to organizations' information assets. That can be internal or external risk, both. So this is usually also like first party driven, and usually it works in a business hours. And lastly, there's a compliance management team. This ensures that the organization comply with its own standards as well as relevant laws, regulation, and industry standards. They are also like first party only. So GRC usually is a first party team. It's not usually outsourced because these guys are the core team that manages company information security policies, procedures, and processes. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, so governance team usually works on these six ideas, these six objectives. The first of all thing is like they have to define the objective on the information security governance program itself. They have to ensure that what compliance requirements they have to meet, which compliance organization, not just against the relevant laws and regulatory requirements, but also which protects the organization from cyber threats, and they have to also align the information security with the business goals. By that I mean like it's information security should be aligned to support the business, and it's not the other way. The next one is establishing role and responsibilities. This means like every member in the information security team should have a role and responsibility, including their leaders, sub team leaders, sub leaders, individual contributors, etc. And ensure that each member understands the responsibility and is accountable for their action. For example, SOC team is responsible for monitoring the SIEM, alerting on threats, triaging alerts and stuff like that. And similarly, other teams who we spoke about earlier. This sometimes also include defining responsibilities of other verticals of IT team. For example, if InfoSec is working on active incident, that means and they require some sort of support from IT team, that means IT team should be there to help information security team. It's not like they don't care about InfoSec at all. So many verticals has to be aligned to this established role and responsibilities part. The next goal is to develop information security policies and procedures. These can also include standards and guidelines that should align with business objectives, and this has to be very comprehensive, consistent, and up to date. There can be a simple policy can be around passwords. So for example, a password in Active Directory should be at least 10 characters with lower upper mix lower upper case along with the symbol, and it should exclude certain keywords, maybe like the company name or the username itself and stuff like that. So those policy has to be defined. And then there can be another policy which says that all the internal application should be SSO. That way, the same password can be used across the organization, while the password cards keeps on rotating as well. So those all procedure has to be defined. The next part is, obviously, you have the policy and procedure, but you have to also implement the controls. So this team will ensure that all the controls that are there, they align with policies and procedures, and risk management plans. This also means, like, ensure that the controls that are implemented are consistent. uh, uh, Sorry. So this ensures that the policies, this ensures that the controls that are implemented are consistent and effective across the organization. It should not be like, and control is deployed on X part of the company and nothing, and that Y part of the company is totally ignored. It should not happen like that. um, the next part is, obviously, the team is responsible for monitoring and reporting any infosec related issues back to the CISO or to the higher ups, as per the the structure of the team. They have to uh, continuously uh, showcase reports on program or progress, what's going on the initiative from the infosec sides, what issues are there, and highlight the risk back to stakeholders, including senior management and the board of directors. And lastly, there has to be some sort of matrix and KPIs to measure whether we are doing good or not. So a governance team uh, defines those metrics, defines those KPIs, which are called key performance indicators for those who don't know, and they keep a tab on these to ensure that, okay, are we doing good or not? If not, then what can be done to improve it? So those are the things that a governance team usually do. um, Apart from these six, there are sometimes that governance team also take budgeting consideration of the entire information security org. So for example, if a new tool has to be bought, that budget has to be forecasted into the next annual budget. Um, and and if there is a headcount, or there is a headcount has to be increased, or team size has to be increased, so that has to be budgeted as well. So those are the things that governance team usually do. Let's move on to the compliance part. Okay. So compliance team is more on focus on the compliance monitoring side. That means that they monitor, they ensure that the company is compliant to regulatory requirements, for example GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, and other stuff. They also keeps a tab on monitoring, they also keep a tab on changing regulatory landscape. For example, if a new law has been introduced, is our company compliant to that? So those all things has to be taken care of by the compliance team. They also keep a tab on monitoring perspective as well. For example, are our tools are actually compliant to the policies and processes that has been set up by information security team or not? That means, like, okay, if you are claiming that you have endpoint agent available on all your user endpoints, but are they actually reporting them? Are they actually reporting back into the console? If so, can you evidently say that, okay, over the 30 days of time, I see 99.99% compliance has been achieved by the endpoint agent? So those has to be uh, monitored on regular basis. Similarly, other stuff like, okay, when we are saying if we have a WAF on the perimeter side, but are all the applications that are exposed towards internet covered under WAF or protected by WAF or not? So those are like the compliance parameters that the team monitors. The next part is audit assessment. The team is also responsible for internal and external audits. So for example, if an external auditor comes and, maybe from a government body or something, and they come back and wants to audit the information security policies, procedures, and internal workings of the team, so they will usually align to compliance team for this one. uh, and the compliance team will act as a what you call as a bridge between internal stakeholders and to the external authority. Uh, the next part is training and awareness. Obviously, training and awareness is very important part of compliance. So security awareness and trainings are usually done for employees, contractors, new employees, other stakeholders, and this is usually taken care to reduce the human level risk that can originate due to mistakes from human level. So they keep on educating workforce, they keep on sending emails, banners, they keep on running campaigns, phishing campaigns, I can say, um, um, uh, to the employees. Obviously that will be all simulated phishing campaigns, and they keep a tab on, like, okay, how are people doing, are there people consistently failing in every um, phishing exercise? If so, they has to be trained, they has to be warned that, okay, this is how common cybersecurity threat likes looks like, and what action has they has to do uh, to report it back, to report, and whom to report and how to report. So all these things has to be taken care under training and awareness part, and they help to create a culture of security within the organization, that hey, security is not an additional overhead for the organization, but it's actually integrated part, or integrated, it's the part of the company. It's just as same as every other department that's there in the company. And obviously there is obviously a continuous improvement part as well that keeps on happening. So when I say continuous improvement, like if you identify a gap, it can be due to compliance monitoring, it can be found during audit and assessment. So those gaps has to be improved as well over the period of time to take or mature the information security program to the next state. Moving on, the next part is risk management team. Now this is the most I would say, again, after SOC, I think these folks are the ones who deal mostly with the vulnerabilities and threats, apart from SOC and security operations centers team. So a risk management team usually divided into two parts. One team for focusing on internal risk, and other one is for third party risk. Let's talk about third party first. So third party risk management team usually take care of what you call a third party related risk that can originate to your company. For example, if you have 10 vendors that are working for your company, so you need to assess what kind of information they are accessing. Are they transferring any of this information back to their own company? Are there any policies for procedures in place to prevent that from happening? Are those vendors that are coming and working for your company, or you are sharing your data with them anyways, are security certified or not? So do they have those credentials? So those has to be assessed by the third party risk management team. They also look into contractual security requirements. For example, if a breach tomorrow happens due to a vendor working on your site and he got phished, so that means that, there has to be some sort of contractual uh, uh, document there to move the liability of the breach to the third party instead of on your own company. Similarly, so that's a third party risk assessment team. um, uh, and now let's move to the internal risk team. So when I say internal risk team, that means like it's just focusing on the risk that are there inside your company, and it can be identified in many ways. Okay. So the first team that is there usually in the internal risk team is the business continuity and disaster recovery team. This team is responsible for ensuring that the organization can continue to operate in event of disaster or disruption. And they may develop and test business continuity and disaster recovery plans to ensure that critical application data can be recovered quickly in event of an outage or disaster. By that means, for example, if you have 10 critical apps in your company, and so BCDR team, what they do is they run cyber drills, or even operational drills as well for these 10 applications. See how they can quickly recover, how they can quickly recover from an incident. For example, if database service is down, can they uh, move to a DR site in matter of X minutes? to bring up the service back? If so, have they tested it before? And if they have tested it before, how did they perform? Were they within the X minutes, or were they above that X minutes limit? So they take care of this side, where the applications, they heavily interact with the application team to ensure that the readiness is there, that disaster readiness is there within the company for those critical applications. The next part is vulnerability management and remediation team. Some people call it VMR team. This team is, I think, the VMR team. It's super critical, I would say. These are the folks who keeps a tab on organizations, and vulnerability or patching status. They keep on doing regular scans of internal IT assets. It can be a normal scan, it can be an authorized scan. um, you know uh, uh, Basically, these are the folks who identify vulnerabilities in the company. Okay. They are usually done through automated scanning tools, and then those automated scanning tools can keep a tab, like, okay, how many Windows systems, for example, are vulnerable to this X vulnerability. And if it is found that, okay, there are systems that are affected by critical vulnerability and aren't patched, but they belong to a critical application, then they have to define SLAs for those systems to be patched on priority. So it can be like 7 days time is required for patching a critical application for a critical vulnerability. And then the risk score also increases for a vulnerability. For example, if a known vulnerability is there, that has a POC out for an exploit, uh, and if the POC out, that means like an attacker, if they breach the company, they might be easily able to exploit the vulnerability to escalate the privileges or bring disruption to the business. In that case, the SLS reduces even further. The risk becomes higher for the specific vulnerability, and the SLS, and the vulnerability has to be taken care on high priority. Um, so usually vulnerability management and remediation teams take care of any vulnerability on the operating system level, as well as on the infrastructure side. um, when I say infrastructure side and OS level, that means vulnerability related to Windows environment, Linux environment, Unix environment, uh, even the user endpoints, Mac OS, and Windows systems. So those all usually are taken care by vulnerability management and remediation team. That can also include the application installed on those systems. For example, if there's an IIS server installed, if there's an Apache server installed, Nginx server, anything on those OS is also responsibility of VMR team. Um, and similarly, if there are vulnerabilities on the IT infrastructure itself, like for maybe you have a VPN, maybe you have firewalls, and if there's a vulnerability found on those firmware itself, then in that case, VMR team usually takes lead on that and get those patched. But the next team I would talk about is application security team. So application security team is are the folks who take care of web application related vulnerabilities. And it cannot be, and it's not limited to just one web vulnerabilities. It can be mobile application testing, it can be threat modeling, it can be code review. So code review is also done by application security team to see if there are any software uh, vulnerabilities or code level vulnerabilities are there on the applications that are being run by the company. It can be on the mobile application side, or it can be on the web application side, both. They also do secure coding standards monitoring. They also do penetration testing as well, um, to simulate real world kind of payloads. This can also include first testing, stored static code analysis, dynamic testing, and any other testing from the offensive side. Lastly, usually some of the members of application security team are responsible for running an offensive security or red team side um, in the company. When I say that, that means they will be responsible for running a red team exercise to ensure that, okay, the SOC team or the blue team is responding, is able to detect certain attacks, and if so, how quickly they uh, detect and respond back to those. um, so offense security is usually part of application security. um, However, it can be separate depending on the company's organization structure. Okay, let's move on to the second last slide this time. uh, we already talked about infosec team tool sets, so these are the usually that were there uh, within coverage of SOC. However, since we have come a long way from that, there are new tools that are used by other teams within the infosec. There can be a risk register which captures the risk that are active in the company and yet to be taken care of, or they are under progress of remediation. There can be a vulnerability management tool which keeps a tab on scans that are happening and see if vulnerability state has moved up from the past or not, a previous scan or not. Then there can be static code analyzers, web application scanners. There will be a configuration scanner. So configuration scanner means if you have to review a firewall configuration, okay, like uh, uh, whether the TLS and SSL is enabled for the console. If so, are the what you call it high uh, highly secure algorithms are used to encrypt the traffic or not. And then there can be and the next tool is GRC tool. So governance, risk and compliance team themselves uses a couple of tools. uh, I'm not aware of any tool exactly as such, but the main goal is to ensure that policies, procedures, and guidelines that they develop are kept in a single location, accessible to all employees, with clear history being maintained for them, like what changes happen from between version 1.1 to 1.2. That way they can trace back, okay, this change was introduced when, and uh, and they can showcase this as a process. Obviously there is a sim and SOAR that's always there, working as bread and butter for security monitoring. Okay, moving on. So now we know how internal teams, how many internal teams are there, but how does these new teams, governance, risk, and compliance, connect back to the older stack? So, for example, uh, if SOC has seen a vulnerability in the wild, they can ask vulnerability management team that, hey, have you seen this vulnerability internally in our environment? Are there any assets affected? If so, what's the impact on it? If SOC sees maybe let's say any scans that are happening on the outside, so they can ask application security team, hey, are you doing some sort of pen testing? Um, um, and similarly, any vulnerabilities that get reported from outside, for example, vulnerability reward kind of bug bounty kind of program is there. Those are usually uh, delivered to SOC as the first layer of security. So SOC will assess that gap. They will ask application security team that, hey, have you seen this vulnerability in the past? Is this something that you are already working on, or the application team is working on? Is it already reported by you or not? If so, then the next steps can be taken. Similarly, offensive security team, they run red team exercises. They give the report back to risk team, and obviously this team will give it back to CISO, and they give the recommendations back to security monitoring team that, hey, these are the misses that you can improve on, or these are the detections that you can build. uh, then compliance team keeps on asking risk team as well as security administrators team that, hey, and obviously security architect engineering team that, hey, how do I look, my compliance posture looks like as of today, or a monthly report or can be there as well. Similarly, security incidents are reported from SOC to governance team, as well as the incident response team also keeps a tab on reporting these to governance team that, hey, this is what we are observing, this is the impact so far, these are the next steps, and this is where we require your help. So everything gets ultimately highlighted back to governance team uh, to take care of the program that's out there and running. So that is all for the series. This pretty much covers that information security org, uh, and our journey in understanding various sub teams within it, and the job of them, and how they keep up the information security as a program running, and keeps the assets and the company secure from threats and from internal risks as well. Sure. Thank you, everyone, for joining on this journey. See you in the next video.